Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rest, Reset, and Reflect. This is a weekly session that's really meant to be really informal and is just an invitation to take a pause during your day to reconnect to yourself, reconnect to your breath, especially in these wild times that we're living in. I mentioned it in the comments around this week's live, but it makes sense if you are not doing well because it's an understatement to say there is a lot happening. So if you need a space to just breathe, take a moment to reconnect with yourself during the week, you're invited to do that here. As an introduction, my name is Yam Adedwaji. I am a former product leader in tech and digital agencies, and I now work as a contemplative sabbatical coach and a writer, creative, partnering with mid career techies to craft intuitive, joyful, and creative career breaks. So, in this space, I talk about themes of rest, reclamation, identity alchemy, and identity changes, particularly as it relates to work and career breaks and sabbaticals. So, today, in terms of how things will go, we'll have about maybe like 10, 15 ish minutes for a grounded exercise, a grounded meditation exercise. And then I will take some time to talk about um, reclaiming forced career breaks. By forced career breaks, I mean breaks from work that you didn't necessarily choose or you didn't necessarily like opt into. So things like layoffs. It could be career breaks that are due to health. So there's unexpected career breaks that can be really disrupting, can be really destabilizing, can be really hard. So just exploring reflections on how can you reclaim and reground when you've experienced those types of things. So feel free to, if you want to just come for the meditation part, you're welcome to do that. If you want to stay for both, if you want to stay for the reflection on reclaiming forced career breaks, do whatever you need to do. So if for folks who are here, give a shout in the comments. I'd love to say hi. And just in terms of orienting into grounding and meditation, I invite you to find a space, if possible, where you feel comfortable, where it's private, where you feel like you can kind of sink into your body, and where you can do that and feel present to yourself. And with that, we will get started. So, I want to invite you wherever you are. Maybe you're seated. If you're at home, maybe you're on a couch or maybe even lying on the floor. I invite you to take a look around your space, see if there's anything you want to adjust or grab that would help you feel more grounded, rested, settled. And when you do that, I invite you to find a position for your body that feels comfortable. And when you found that position, I invite you to either close your eyes or keep a soft gaze. And just gently start to notice what's present here for you. Inviting you to start to notice your breath. Nothing that you need to force or change. Just notice how it feels for the air to move in and out of your body. Notice how it feels for your chest to rise and fall. Starting to tune into the rhythm of what your breath feels like. And as you continue to tune into your breath, I invite you to notice the surface where your body is making contact. So maybe that's the chair you're sitting in, maybe it's with that couch or floor, maybe it's your feet on the floor. Inviting you to notice those points of contact. And maybe you can even let your body be really heavy. Let your body surrender to these surfaces so that they can support you. And as you surrender to these supportive surfaces, I invite you to notice your heart and heart space. Maybe you want to place a hand on that area, letting it be a reminder that you're safe, you're present, you're here. And just start to tune into what's present in this heart space. Noticing your breath circulating here. Maybe you notice the rhythm of your heartbeat. And you're welcome to take any movements, big or small, to feel into this area. Maybe it's a stretch of your shoulders, maybe a twist. Just allowing yourself to feel what this heart space needs to expand and be even more present. And as this heart space comes even more alive, I invite you to gently bring your awareness to your pelvic area. Maybe you breathe into your left hip. Maybe you breathe into your right hip. And then bring your focus and awareness to your center. And I invite you to notice what's present here. You're welcome to breathe into the space, or to stretch, to twist, to move, maybe even make a sound as to what is resonating in this hip and pelvic area. And as you tune into your body, I want to invite you to let this question ruminate in your body. After I say the question, there's no need to push or force an answer or a response or a meaning. Just notice what comes up from your body. Maybe it is an image, maybe it's a sound, a song, a word, a phrase, but it could also just be a sensation. Just allowing yourself to notice what arises. The question I invite you to consider is, what do I need to remember about who I am? What do I need to remember about who I am? As you hold that question with your breath and body, you're even welcome to move in the way that feels like it expresses your body's response. You're also even invited to consider, as you notice what comes up, does that sensation feel big? Does it feel small? Does it have a temperature, a texture? Inviting you to welcome your body's wisdom in response to the question, what do I need to remember about who I am? And as you hold that question in your body, and we bring this meditation to a closing point, I'm inviting you to notice if there's anything in particular from what came up in response to that question to hold on to reflect on later, maybe even to anchor or root into. And as you gain that one portion that maybe you want to sink into, maybe you also want to give a word of thanks to your body for its breath. Maybe you want to thank your body for the wisdom your body has shown you. Maybe you even want to thank your body for the ways that your body carries you through every day and has carried you through this present day. And as you do that, inviting you to maybe gently sway back and forth. Maybe you want to notice again the points of contact to the floor with your feet, to your base on your chair. Maybe it's a back on the floor or couch. And inviting you to, when you're ready, gently open your eyes. And wherever you are, maybe you want to take a look around to reorient to your space. Maybe you want to do a shake, a shimmy, a stretch as you move out of that meditation. I hope that was a grounding, settling, illuminating time. And I invite you again to take that question, what do I need to remember about who I am? And maybe you want to jot it down in a notebook, a journal, to come back to it later. Or even keep sitting with it now if you're going to hang out with me for the next few minutes. So, as I mentioned, I wanted to get into this topic of how to reclaim forced career breaks. And as I mentioned before, with a forced career break being a perhaps a layoff or perhaps something like needing to take time off of work because of personal health, or even you may need to be a caregiver for a loved one. But essentially, these moments where you need to step away from work, and it's not necessarily something you would have chosen otherwise. I'll start by sharing my forced career break story, and it's not from layoffs. I've actually never been laid off, but I think the reason why I haven't ever been laid off is because I've had so many forced career breaks from burnout, which I have talked about often because it is a huge part of my career story. So, from my very first job, working at a startup in Silicon Valley, I think I was there about a year and a half. And it was an experience where I was deep in anxiety, depression, where I remember regularly feeling so much anger, so much pain, so much fear, constant fear about being fired, working really long hours, and coming to this point where, as I think I was like 23, really early in my career, I I didn't there was no way that I could keep going, and I felt so gutted and depleted that I could not imagine trying to find another job. So this was a really scary place to be at. One, just really early in my career when I didn't have a lot of experience. I didn't have, really like a big or strong network. And this was also during the Great Recession, which I was seeing people had way more experience than me saying like, I can't find a job. And that was scary to see as someone that I wondered, how can I leave this job when I don't have another one lined up? But my health was in such a bad state that I really for me, had to lean on my faith and lean on my community and my family to make that difficult decision to leave, for the sake of my healing. And unfortunately, this was not the only time when I left a job due to burnout and to mental and emotional health concerns. Multiple other instances of doing this in my career. So I think it's something like 4 or 5. I've written about it. I can share the link in this, but to share that for a forced career break is a painful part of my story. And it's something that I hold with tenderness, for not just myself, but for other people that are experiencing it. I know, especially in this time where within the industry, there have been so many layoffs, and it's a scary, painful experience. So, inviting you to reflect on and hold what it can mean for you to reclaim this experience for yourself. What I'll offer is that I think a lot of the notion around, and it's not necessarily like externally explicitly spoken, but I think there's a sense where if you are in a forced career break or if you've been laid off, that you're not allowed to rest, you're not allowed to have fun, you're not allowed to like enjoy life until you get another job. And 100%, I do not minimize the reality and the stress of needing to have income coming in and the economic realities around that, because 100%, if you don't have those basic needs cared for, it's difficult to focus on anything else. So, certainly, I'm not meaning to minimize that. What I am wanting to turn a lens and a view to, though, is this perspective or idea that because you're not working in a job, that you're not allowed to access these very human parts of yourself where you need to rest, you need joy, you need connection with your loved ones, you need play, you need enjoyment. And these needs are valid whether or not you have a job. So what I want to offer is, how can you even make your job search enjoyable? Which maybe that sounds like it's absolutely not possible. I know, like, I have been one that I've always hated job searches. I always hated, and I felt when I went on the job boards or LinkedIn, whatever, to look at jobs, I could feel like the heavy energy on me. Like, I hate this. This is horrible. Why do I have to do, why do I have to do this? But as I think about it, I feel like why, like, because it can be such a stressful, difficult process, how can we, like, kind of flip the script and make it an experience that's enjoyable for us? And I think that there is a way that, like, when we're able to move from joy and fun and play and curiosity, that's an avenue of reclamation, and that then we're actually able to, I think, connect into more authentic and life-giving and more aligned job situations than if we're accessing it from a place of, again, like how it was for me, where it was like, man, like, I really, really hate this. Someone I wanted to mention is Danielle Wilkie, who she's a former product exec and leader, and she also is a sabbatical coach and a practitioner. She creates a communal context for you to experience sabbaticals in community. And what I love, there are 2 things from Danielle that I want to mention. One, in terms of job search, she offers the perspective of how can you enter into a job search from that place of curiosity and connection. So instead of just entering in the job search of clicking and applying and those kind of places, but how can you find the folks that you genuinely feel energized by their work, you generally feel interested in it, and with really kind of thoughtful questions, seeking to make connections with them, and from that way, organically opening up opportunities. And I love that approach. And I wish, in earlier in my career, that would more have been my approach, because it leans into the energy of your natural curiosity. And when you lean into the energy of that natural curiosity, I think it's a form of power. I think it's a way that you reclaim your personal power and agency in this process. And you communicate to yourself that you are worthy of finding a job that you enjoy and that matches your values, and where you respect the leadership and the culture there. So that's one thing I want to invite from Daniel Wilkie. And the other thing that I want to point out, and I'll put the link to this in the comments, is she wrote a Substack piece that I really appreciate called "What If a Layoff is Actually a Midlife Sabbatical in Disguise?" And I love this invitation because what she is inviting folks into is that you did not choose this layoff, yet you have the opportunity to fold in practices that can be an avenue of reclamation, that it can be an avenue of renewal and reflection and rest. And maybe you decide you're actually going to take an intentional amount of time and you're not going to be job searching, and you are just going to give yourself some space to breathe, to rest, to reflect. Maybe you can't do that. But either way, how can you roll in practices that are focused on your self renewal. So I know that what I've often heard in terms of job search process is you should spend 8 hours of your day, Monday through Friday, job searching just like it was a job, which I can appreciate the intention of that, of like, be intentional and being focused in terms of your job search. What I don't like about that, and I don't certainly never liked it for myself, was one, like even in a regular job, like you can't really work for 8 hours a day. Like nobody's like sitting like for 8 hours a day. Maybe if you're in like a flow state, but really like most people can't. And so I feel like it's also just forcing yourself into a structure that doesn't necessarily work for you. If that works for you, then great. But what I invite is, how can you create a rhythm of job searching for you that is more centered around how you work best? How can maybe you can do the job search process during the time when your energy is best? Maybe before you dive into the job search process, what are kind of like rituals or routines that feel nourishing, that feel good before you hop into that process? So that instead of it just being like every day is just only doing the job search, how can you start to re-anchor yourself into rest and recovery, especially if you're coming out of a situation that was particularly draining for you? How can you allow yourself space to rest? How can you allow yourself space to reflect? Because you may have been in a situation where it may have been a good situation, or a negative situation, but I think there's this opportunity to take a beat, to take a pause, to reflect on what worked about your last role, what didn't work, where did you feel most energized, what did you enjoy most about the work, what helped you be successful in that role, what didn't, um, what hindered your success in that role, what worked about, maybe with who your manager was, what didn't work, what worked with your colleagues. So taking a step back to look at the situation that you are leaving and making a conscious choice to note, this is what I want to take forward into my next role. And in turn, this is what's important to me as I do this job search. So that as you're doing the search, it's not just you have to take any and every job that opens up. And again, I understand if they're truly just like kind of pressing realities that you're like, look, I've just got to get money in, that's totally real. And I 1000% understand that. I'd say though, both and can be possible. That even if you do need to take a job right away to get that money in, how can you still take space for that reflection, so that, say, if that job that you just need to take to get money in, so that you can already set up for yourself the standards, the values, what's important to you in your next role. Because again, that is setting you up to reconnect to your personal power. It's setting you up to have a clear compass of how you set yourself up for success. So, wanting to invite those practices. And I also want to invite, just looking at my notes, I also want to invite you to create space for yourself to grieve. It's maybe more common now, but I feel like we aren't given a lot of permission and space to grieve in the context of work and jobs and career, even though most people spend the majority of our time at work. The average person will spend a third of their lives at work. Some people, you end up spending more time at work than you do with your loved ones, and yet we're not given space to grieve when we experience a loss, like a layoff, when we experience this abrupt change. And I'll say this both for people who have been laid off and for the people who remain as well, that you are losing, you're not able to work any longer with a colleague or a friend. It changes the nature and the vibe at your workspace. But particularly for folks who are laid off, that it's totally valid to give yourself space to grieve in whatever way that looks like for you. And grief is a natural part of being human in general, but it's also important to create that space so that you can create space for what's next. And it's certainly not a one and done thing of even if you set aside a specific time to let yourself kind of feel and move through those emotions. Grief is not linear. It's not, you can't control it necessarily, but it's an important process to honor your journey, to honor who you are. And I think it can also offer clarity about what you want, what you need, and things that you want to do differently. If that is something that you're wanting support with, I have a resource called the Mosaic 31 Days of Reflection on Career Grief and Transition. And this is a free resource. And the intention of it is to guide you through brief poetry, creative excerpts and guided questions to help you reflect on your career journey and in turn to help you get insight over 31 days of what you need, what you want, who are you becoming. So I'll also include that note in the comments, and you're also always welcome to send me a DM in terms of that resource. The last thing that I'm going to mention during this time is an avenue of reclamation during a forced career break is community. And we need community regardless of circumstance, but in particular in the situation where it wasn't expected, where it's a destabilizing, where it can be painful, community is that much more important. And in my story, was community was the only way that I really made it through all these forced career breaks, both from the economic standpoint, because I was, in most of those cases, I, was living with folks. So I had a lower cost of living. So that softened the blow in terms of financially and also just in terms of the support. I remember, especially with leaving my first job, it was so scary for me but I had that support from my family, my friends that saw how painful this work experience had been. And that emotionally reassured me that I could make this hard choice for myself. During another job that I had, which is actually like a contract job, a lot of lessons from that job that maybe is for another time, but this was a contract job where I ended up, and it really ended up being like 2 or 3 jobs in one. And I was working like 24 hours around the clock. And most of my job experiences have, I really worked with like really lovely people, but this was like one of the very, very few contexts where the people who were supervising me were actually just like not kind people. They, just kind of in the way that they treated people was horrible. And so this was another situation where I was like, I know this is a contract situation, but like this is horrible. But I was really scared to leave it. And so actually it was a case where I had a friend actually like come to the office so that when I told them I'm not moving forward with this contract, that my friend helped me gather my things and leave. So that's just a story to share that it's okay and it's necessarily to be to lean on your people, to lean on your community. We're not meant to navigate life alone and certainly not difficult moments alone. And I also want to call out a really beautiful resource. There is a woman named Melanie. I am not sure how to pronounce her last name, so I'm just going to say Melanie E. But I'll link to this resource. She created, I believe she was laid off, and she created a community called Laid Off. So she created a Substack newsletter, and she's telling the stories. Folks, people are telling their stories of how they were laid off, when they were laid off, and I love this platform because she is really reclaiming their experience for herself. And she's also not only doing that, but she's creating an avenue of connection and solidarity for people who've had this experience. And by creating this avenue for folks to tell their stories, I think the telling of your story in your own words and own way is a powerful way to reclaim a situation that you did not choose for yourself. And so I love that she's doing that. The community has, I'm just looking at the site. I think their community, there's a Discord that I think has over 1,000 people that are part of it. And then the laid off stories, I'm not sure how many numbers there is, but I'll also include the link to this um, because again, it's an avenue of community, an avenue of connection, to know that you're not alone, to know that you are held and supported, and to be able to connect with people who get it. Because I know it can also, I imagine, just be frustrating if you've been laid off, you're in the mix, and you've been, searching for a job, and people who haven't been in it, people who haven't seen how wild and difficult this job market is, kind of being like, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Um, I can imagine that brings up all kinds of things. So I will include that resource for you as well. And with that, I'm going to bring this time to a close. If you were here with me, give a shout in the comments. Or if you watch this later, also feel free to give a shout in the comments, or you're always free to send me a DM. I'd love to hear if there was anything that spoke to you or stood out to you, or if you have any questions. And I want to offer that if you are a person who is exploring how you can reclaim a forced career break, I am launching this month Soulful Sabbatical Strategy, which is a somatically grounded experience of reflection and planning so that at the end of our work together, you can envision a sabbatical that is rooted in your deepest desires and is rooted in an actual tangible plan that accounts for financial realities, that accounts for logistic realities, that accounts for your grown up responsibilities because you are an adult and you have real responsibilities. And that also accounts for what are your fears? What do you perceive as your barriers to taking a sabbatical or to making your forced career break a sabbatical? What from your lens are the risk to creating and taking a sabbatical? What are the trade-offs? So this is a work that we'll do together so that at the end of our time of working together, again, you have a tangible plan that is rooted truly in what you want, not in the shirts of what everybody says sabbatical is. Because people are out here and like, on a sabbatical, you should learn 5 languages and climb Mount Kilimanjaro and run a marathon. And a lot of you are burned out and you're not going to have energy to do that anyways. So, this is an experience that I invite you into. Send me a DM if you want to learn more about what that would look like and what that experience is. And otherwise, thanks for joining me. Thanks for watching. And I will catch you next week.